All right. Let's get into this concept of achieving, well, extraordinary results, drawing from Price Pritchett's you ideas.
Yeah, it's a fascinating way of looking at personal effectiveness. Not
Yes.
just small improvements, but massive jumps.
Exactly. The goal here is really to understand what's meant by a quantum leap and how it kind of flips our usual thinking about success on its head.
hmm And it's especially relevant if you feel like you're putting in all this effort, working really hard, but the results just aren't scaling up,
Yeah.
like you're stuck.
Or just wondering if there's a faster track, a more direct way to get to significant growth instead of that slow grind.
Right. This whole approach suggests maybe we're capable of way more, much faster than we typically believe. It's about exponential change, not just adding a bit more.
Okay, so where does it start? What's the fundamental problem this approach identifies? I think it mentions incrementalism.
Incrementalism, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the core issue it points to. It's that default assumption that progress has to be this slow, steady, step-by-step
Okay.
process. Improve 1% here, tweak things a little there.
Which sounds, well, normal, right? Isn't that how most things work? Gradual improvement.
That's the convention, sure. But this perspective argues that relying only on gradual progress is actually a major limitation. A misconception, it calls it, especially when you're aiming for a real breakthrough.
Mm-hmm.
It contrasts that with the quantum leap, which is described as a sudden, dramatic, non-linear jump in your results, happening really quickly. It's not about adding to your effectiveness, it's about multiplying it.
Multiplying it. Wow, a quantum leap.
Yeah.
It sounds like skipping multiple rungs on the ladder all at once.
Pretty much. And there's a great metaphor used to explain why we get stuck just climbing one rung at a time. The fly bottle.
Ah, yes. The fly's trapped in the bottle.
Exactly. Imagine these flies inside a glass bottle. They want out, but they keep flying downwards or sideways, hitting the glass over and over. They're trying harder, right? But using the same method that doesn't work.
And they completely miss.
They completely miss the obvious way out. The open top of the bottle, right there above them. The unconventional escape route.
So the idea is that we do that too. We get trapped by our own thinking.
Precisely. We get stuck because of self-imposed limits. Maybe it's fear, or what our rational logic tells us is realistic, or just sticking to what worked in the past. We keep banging against the familiar walls instead of looking for that radical, different path, the open top.
So putting more effort, trying harder, using a strategy that's fundamentally flawed, it's just wasted energy.
That's a key takeaway. More effort on the same failing method will not break through barriers. It directly challenges that belief that just gritting your teeth and trying harder is always the answer.
Okay, so if trying harder the same way isn't the solution for a leap, what is? This seems to push towards, well, something different.
Definitely. It argues that these quantum leaps demand a radical departure. You have to break away from your usual habits, your usual ways of thinking and acting. It calls for unconventional methods, sometimes even paradoxical actions that might seem illogical at first.
All right, let's unpack some of those. The first one that jumps out is quit trying harder. That sounds like permission to slack off.
Huh. Yeah, it sounds like that, but it's not about being lazy or giving up. The point is, if your current strategy isn't working for the big goal, pouring more energy into that specific strategy just leads to burnout and tiny gains, if any. It's about recognizing when pushing harder in the same direction isn't smart. It's saying, pause the frantic effort for a second.
And look for a different door, so try differently, not just try harder.
Exactly. And that connects directly to the next principle. Ignore conventional approaches.
Grr.
The logic here is that conventional thinking and methods usually lead to, well, conventional results, modest gains.
Right. Ordinary efforts get ordinary outcomes.
So if you want something extraordinary, a quantum leap, you probably can't get there by doing what everyone else does or what you've always done. You might need to abandon the status quo.
Seek drastic changes rather than just small adjustments to the usual routine.
That's the idea. Relying on past successes or faith in the familiar can actually hold you back. It means you have to be willing to break your patterns, your established methods. If current strategies aren't getting you close to that leap, maybe you need to stop them completely.
And look for, what was the phrase, elegant solutions.
Yeah, elegant solutions that might surprisingly need less wasted effort.
Okay, less effort. That sounds like one of those paradoxical ideas you mentioned, like doing less for quantum leaps. How does that work? It sounds totally backward.
It really does, doesn't it? But it's not about doing less work overall, necessarily. It's about realizing that massive growth doesn't usually come from just piling on more hours within the same framework.
It's about changing the framework itself.
Yes, shifting towards smarter strategies, things that have high leverage, where a small input creates a huge output. It's about focusing your energy, doing less of the stuff that doesn't really move the needle, less ineffective effort, less wasted motion.
Ah, okay, so it's about efficiency and focus, not laziness, like finding the minimum effective dose, just the right amount of the right action.
That's a good way to think about it. Find the critical actions and focus there. Avoid the excess that doesn't add value.
Got it. Now, another challenging one, choose a different set of risks. We usually try to avoid risk, right?
We do. But this perspective says risk is unavoidable if you're trying to achieve anything meaningful. You can't eliminate it, you just choose which risks you face.
So what's the different way of looking at risk here?
It emphasizes the hidden risks of not taking action, of staying safe. The risk of complacency, of stagnating, of missing out on huge opportunities, and ultimately the risk of never achieving what you really want.
So playing it safe, staying in the comfort zone,
Yeah.
that's actually the bigger risk long term if you want to leap.
Often, yes. It pretty much guarantees you won't make the leap. So taking the risks associated with unconventional action, stepping outside your comfort zone, is framed as a conscious choice. It's choosing the risk of growth over the risk of stagnation.
It's a calculated gamble for a much bigger payoff, rather than passively accepting the slow decline of staying put.
Exactly. And it mentions the risk to your belief in yourself. Choosing not to leap often means settling for less than you're capable of. That's a risk too.
Hmm. Okay, speaking of uncomfortable things, this approach seems to lean into discomfort and even failure. There's embracing discomfort or run from safe.
Yes. This is about reframing those feelings we normally avoid: unease, anxiety, feeling a bit lost or out of control. Instead of seeing them as stop signs, see them as progress indicators.
Indicators that you're actually stretching yourself, moving into
Right.
new territory.
Precisely. Big change rarely feels comfortable. That comfort zone might feel safe, but it's where potential goes to die, according to this view. Embracing discomfort means recognizing that difficulty and uncertainty are part of the journey towards a leap.
So if it feels messy or uncertain, that's actually good.
It can be a very positive sign. The process is often messy, and if the risks you're taking don't make you feel at least a little uncomfortable, maybe they aren't bold enough for a true quantum leap.
Wow. Okay. And then, even more radically, seek failure. Why on earth would you seek failure?
Yeah, that one really stops you in your tracks. It's not about trying to fail, obviously. It's about being willing to fail,
Right.
actively pushing boundaries to the point where failure becomes a real possibility, even likely sometimes.
Why? What's the benefit?
Failure's reframed here. It's not the end. It's invaluable resource. It's data. Shows you the edges of your capabilities, helps you learn incredibly fast. When you're willing to risk failure, you try things you otherwise wouldn't.
So it's about aggressive learning, finding out what doesn't work quickly so you can adjust.
Exactly. Difficulties and problems become positive signs you're pushing hard enough. Failures are feedback loops, stepping stones. There's a line that says something like, everything looks like a failure in the middle. You treat it as information, not defeat, and keep moving.
That requires a really different relationship with failure than most of us have.
Totally. And then there's this other layer, moving beyond just the rational, rely on the unseen forces.
Okay, now that sounds a bit out there. What does that mean?
It's about tapping into things beyond just your conscious, logical mind. Think intuition, gut feelings, subconscious insights, even serendipity, those fortunate coincidences. The idea is, if you're intensely focused on a clear, bold goal, you become more receptive to these things. Unexpected solutions or opportunities might appear, things you wouldn't have noticed otherwise.
So it's about trusting your intuition more, paying attention to those hunches or unexpected connections that pop up.
Yeah, being open to the possibility that when you commit fully to the pursuit, resources and answers can emerge from unexpected places. Maybe from your own deeper mind, maybe from the world around you.
It feels like all these external strategies, ignoring convention, seeking failure, trusting unseen forces, they all depend heavily on a significant internal shift first. Mindset seems huge here.
Absolutely. Mindset is described as foundational. It's about identifying and actively letting go of the limiting beliefs that hold you back, the assumptions you make about what's possible for you.
Which connects to ideas like change your personal rules for success. Like
Yep.
you need a different rule book if you're playing a much bigger game.
Exactly. And maybe the most critical practice for the inner game is suspend disbelief.
Suspend disbelief. Does that mean pretending things are true when they're not?
It's more specific than that. It's about consciously, actively setting aside your doubts and negative beliefs, particularly about yourself and your ability to achieve the leap. The core instruction is something like, act as if your success is for certain.
Act as if, even with no proof. Wow, that's a big ask.
It is. But the reasoning is that doubt and skepticism are like psychological anchors. They paralyze you. They often come from past negative experiences, just mental junk.
So suspending disbelief is about shifting your internal state from fear to confidence.
Exactly. From hesitation to action. It enables you to take the bolder steps required for a leap. Opportunities are more likely to flow towards confidence than towards doubt.
And it ties back to that idea of untapped potential, like if you're going to doubt something.
Doubt your limits. Yes. Challenge those old assumptions about what you can and can't do by just going for it, acting as if you can.
Okay. And underlying all of this, there's a principle about responsibility.
Yes, full responsibility, or take radical responsibility. This is presented as absolutely crucial, non-negotiable, really.
What does it mean in practice?
It means taking 100% ownership for your results, your situation, everything. No blaming external circumstances, no blaming other people, no making excuses, zero.
Why is that so critical?
Because blaming disempowers you. If it's someone else's fault, you can't fix it. If you take full ownership, even if it feels unfair initially, you regain control and the power to act and change things. It says personal effectiveness skyrockets the moment blaming stops.
That makes sense. Another internal one is unhook from yesterday, detaching from your past.
Right. Don't let your history define your future potential. Leave behind the how things have always been done mentality, and even who you used to be. Because that past self created your current results, not the future leap you want.
So past failures and successes can be traps. Failure creates fear, sure, but success.
Success can create complacency. It makes you want to stick with the old strategies that worked before. But those strategies might be totally inadequate for the exponential jump you're aiming for now. You need different thinking, different actions.
Which brings us back to the core promise, you. Unleashing that dormant potential.
Exactly. The central idea is that you have this massive capacity for exponential improvement right now. You're likely operating far below your real potential. Achieving you is about breaking through those perceived limits, which are mostly self-imposed.
So it's less about adding more software to your current operating system, like just trying harder, and more about upgrading the whole operating system, your fundamental mindset.
That's a great analogy, yes.
Yeah.
And it involves tapping into those inner resources, your strengths, intuition, creativity, those untapped gifts. Which is why it says, look inside for the opportunity. The resources are already there.
Okay, so we have the mindset shifts, the counterintuitive principles. How do we actually do something? How does this translate into taking action?
A key principle for action is focus on ends rather than means.
Meaning, keep your eye firmly on the prize, the final outcome.
Yes. Have really clear, compelling vision of the end result you want the ends. But, and this is crucial, don't get paralyzed by needing to know how you're going to get there right now. Don't get bogged down in the step-by-step methodology, the means up front.
So you don't need the whole map before you start the journey.
Exactly. Envision the destination clearly, feel it, and then start moving. The argument is that the specific steps, the how, will often reveal themselves as you take action. If you hold that clear picture of the goal, you'll start to see and attract the resources, the methods, the answers.
That requires a lot of trust.
Yeah.
And comfort with ambiguity, I guess.
Definitely. You're kind of drawing the map as you go, which is both exciting and maybe a bit scary.
Yeah. And that connects to another action principle, trust in the power of pursuit.
Right. Big goals, quantum leaps, don't happen by just wishing. Wishing is passive. Pursuit is active. It means taking concrete steps, moving towards the goal.
And the act of pursuing actually changes things.
That's the claim. The world behaves differently when you go after what you want. Taking action creates momentum. It surfaces opportunities you wouldn't see if you were just sitting back and waiting. Action unlocks potential. It's about grabbing the chances available now.
Which sounds like the final action piece. Make your move before you're ready.
Absolutely critical. Waiting until you feel 100% ready, totally prepared, perfectly confident, well, you might wait forever.
So jump in even if you feel unprepared.
Take the leap. Imperfect action taken now is far better than perfect planning that never leads to action. You learn by doing. The path forward becomes clearer once you're actually moving.
It's clear this whole framework isn't just abstract philosophy. It's designed for immediate, practical use.
Very much so. Putting it into practice requires that radical departure. We talked about breaking old habits, challenging conventional thinking. It means consciously applying these principles daily.
So practically, it involves things like defining that big, bold quantum leap goal that really excites you, maybe scares you a little.
Yes. Then actively identifying and challenging the beliefs that tell you it's impossible.
Brainstorming those unconventional strategies, maybe even things that seem illogical.
Suspending your disbelief, committing to act as if it's certain, embracing the discomfort that comes with pushing boundaries.
Being willing to encounter failure as feedback, trusting your intuition and those unseen
And
forces.
just taking action. Decisive, immediate action. Procrastination is the enemy here. Rapid movement is part of the formula. It's about integrating all these pieces.
Practices like visualization, actively questioning limiting beliefs, assessing the risks of inaction versus action, these are tools.
Exactly. Tools to help you make that internal and external shift consistently.
It helps to know a bit about where these ideas originated. Bryce Pritchett worked with big companies, right? Fortune 500s.
He did. And these concepts apparently came from observing real organizations and people dealing with major changes and disruptions. He saw that the ones stuck in that slow, incremental mindset often got left behind,
While the ones willing to make bold, counterintuitive moves thrived.
especially during crises, yeah. He saw the fly bottle and action teams just banging their heads against the same problems with the same old methods. The ones who succeeded were willing to jump to that open top.
Are there specific examples? I think the material mentioned a few, like Pritchett's own consulting story.
Right, his own quantum leap. He decided to stop chasing small, local clients and made a bold move to target a huge Fortune 500 company. This forced him to completely revamp his approach, materials, everything. He had to act as if he belonged at that level before he technically did.
And it worked.
Dramatically. He landed a contract 10 times larger than his previous ones relatively quickly. That's make your move before you're ready and ignore conventional approaches right there.
What about the swim team example?
Yeah, the athletes. They had this audacious goal, like a 25% time reduction. Instead of just adding more laps, the conventional approach, they did something radical.
What was it?
They stopped almost everything else and focused intensely for a short, intense period on perfecting one specific aspect of stroke technique. Super unconventional.
And the result?
They blew past their goal, achieving something like a 40% reduction in just 4 weeks. It showed how intense focus on a high-leverage, unconventional strategy, doing less of the ineffective stuff, could yield exponential results.
Wow. And the tech startup.
Similar theme. Facing impossible deadlines and budget limits for a new product launch. The standard roadmap was 6 months.
Which they didn't have.
Right. So they threw out the conventional plan and adopted this super fast, iterative 10-day sprint model. Build a basic version, test it, learn, iterate fast.
Making their move before they were ready with a perfect product.
Exactly. And ignoring the conventional wisdom about long development cycles. They got a working product out much faster than competitors, securing their market position.
It's interesting to think about how this U approach compares to other ideas about success. Like, the material briefly mentions Carol Dweck's mindset work, grit, perseverance, long-term effort.
It does. And Dweck's work on growth mindset and perseverance is obviously hugely important. The distinction drawn, though, is that Dweck's focus might seem more incremental compared to the sudden, non-linear leap described in U.
So U isn't saying effort and grit don't matter.
Not at all. But it suggests that sometimes, especially when you're really stuck in that fly bottle, just applying more grit to the same wrong strategy won't get you out. You might need a pattern interrupt, a completely different approach.
A radical shift, not just more force.
Right. You seems positioned for those moments when incremental just isn't cutting it, when you need that breakthrough. It's less about the long, steady climb and more about finding the shortcut, the warp zone, through unconventional thinking and action.
Okay. So, wrapping up these core ideas from the U perspective.
It really is a powerful challenge, isn't it? To that default assumption that big progress has to be slow, linear, and earned only through grinding away within the usual rules.
Yeah, it proposes that real breakthroughs, these quantum leaps, come from a different place. Fundamental shifts in mindset, embracing the unconventional, even the paradoxical.
Taking bold action before you feel ready, and trusting that the how will emerge if you stay focused on that clear, compelling outcome.
It really pushes you to consider that maybe your biggest limitations aren't out there, but inside your own head, like those flies, just not seeing the obvious escape route because it breaks the rules of the bottle.
That the path to exponential growth, to becoming you, might be available right now if you're willing to see and act differently.
It definitely leaves you thinking. If trying harder the same way isn't always the key, and if discomfort and failure can actually be signals you're on the right track, What familiar rules, what comfortable assumptions about how things have to work might you need to break to find your open door?